And I would like if you could all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. So before we get started, just on behalf of the entire town council, I wish to congratulate Councilor Duff and his wife on the birth of their son. And the new baby's name is Everett Alder Duff. And so congratulations. I know Chris is home at this very precise moment, introducing the baby to his little younger brother. So congratulations, Chris, to you and your entire family. Good luck. God bless. And now we'll move on to public comment. This portion of the meeting is specifically set aside for comments from the public who are asked to limit their comments to 2 minutes. Any person interested in providing public comment should email public meetings at rockyhillct.gov. You will be provided with a link to attend the Zoom remote meeting and instructions on how you will participate. And I had just checked a moment ago, and we do not have anyone in the queue for public comment. So we are going to move forward with the proceedings, beginning with budget review, discussion, possible action, subsection A, revisiting the budget on both the town and BOE sides. So
right now, we do have that resolution from the other night with a proposal of a number of cuts at various departments that were discussed the other night, totaling up to 636. Today, I did receive a few questions, and I forwarded those questions on to the appropriate departments to answer them. So I don't know if you want to first go through the questions and then address the resolution. And then it's where you want to go from there.
Sure, I think it makes sense to go question, answer, question, answer.
Okay. So I guess the first question came in for the police department stating investigations run 5 days a week, single shift. If it ran 7 days a week, can we cut the overtime, the amount of the overtime from the budget? So Mike's going to address that one.
Okay, I'm back. Hello, everyone. Alan, maybe specifically for you, because I know you asked me this question in our last meeting. Let me give you a little background on this this line. This overtime line doesn't exclusively fund overtime caused by detectives coming in after hours for call-ins. It does cover that, but in addition to that, all the overtime that's generated by our school resource officers are taking out of that line as well. We also have an officer that's assigned to a narcotics task force. So he has and does incur overtime during the course of the week. He's paid out of that line as well. When we have to send detectives for training that incurs overtime, that line would pay that as well. So as you can see, it's not just when they get called in after hours. Now, relative to your question, can I change the staffing to cover 7 days a week? I can't do that with the number of detectives that I have right now. But what I can tell you we've done, and this actually goes back to March, we've used the existing detectives that we have. We're now covering days and evening shifts, Monday through Friday, okay? So we kind of reduced our vulnerability for evening call-ins. So the only shift that's not covered is midnights and then the weekends. We traditionally do not get many calls for detectives on the weekends. So I'm confident with spreading the coverage from day shift to evening shift. That's going to be a reduction, but I would encourage you not to take any money out of that line, only because it funds those other activities and officers as well. Not sure if that-
No, thank you for looking at it, though. I appreciate the feedback.
You're welcome.
John, are you talking?
I didn't want to get caught like the Weathersfield guy.
Wow, that's crazy.
Sorry, I'll start again. Turnout gear was cut $10,000 by the department. So far in the current year, has not used the majority of the money in that budget as of 3/30. Can we pre-purchase equipment in the current year budget?
Thank you, John, and good evening, everyone. We did a gear sizing in January 7th, I believe. And what happened was the factory was unable to get fabric to complete the order. They have since been able to get it. And we are expecting the order to be delivered within the next 2 weeks, which will take, I would say, about 90% of that budget.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Okay, second question relates to the part-time administrative position in the day shift. Can this responsibility be turned over to the fire marshal, even if we pay a stipend, as he is already a paid position?
Well, the fire marshal already has emergency management and additional duties I don't believe would be appropriate. This is a fire department, fire suppression based role and not code enforcement. I have some goals, some ideas where we would go with the position, the 19-hour-a-week position. And one of the goals is it would provide a degree of stability and continuity by ensuring a daily point of public contact for fire services and any pop-up issues. The position can also provide some relief for administrative functions of the chief officers, giving us more time to focus on our individual duties. And the position can focus and assist with recruiting and retaining volunteers. A lot of time we operate in a crisis management mode. We move from problem to problem. This position will assist with some of the goals and objectives of the department that whack-a-mole management doesn't allow us to focus on, and vice versa. I think the position can handle some of the pop-up issues or challenges that we face. A couple other things, I think the position will be very valuable when allowed to focus on research for possible alternative funding sources, grants that may be out there for us. The town is continuing to grow. Our call volume is high, and this position will allow us to continue to operate in a safe, efficient, and effective manner.
Okay. Thank you. And your last question, health and safety for physicals. I guess current year it's been budgeted for 35,000 and we're not close to spending that amount of money as of March 30th. Do we need this much in the budget? Understanding it's an annual physical.
Yes, annual physicals were postponed due to the COVID crisis. And that was in consultation with our provider. We should be starting them back up again after May 20th and hopefully have them completed by June 30th. So keeping that number in the budget will allow us to maintain our annual physical program.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Next is the Parks Department. The first question is about opening up the pools. If we don't open the pools this summer, or what costs can be removed from the budget?
Good evening, everyone. Congratulations, Chris, on your new addition. I'm sorry for your loss, Counselor Emmanuel. So we did some rough guesstimates. For the outdoor pool, we'd save around between 60 and 65,000. Close to 60,000 of it would be for part-time salaries, and another 5,000 would be towards chemicals.
Okay, and then the other question relates to Parks Grounds. The food line is up $1,650, and that's because of,
Yeah, that was negotiated in the union contract. So that's per the union contract. That's the only reason it went up. It's about $450 per guy for the winter call-outs for food.
it's the same amount that the Highway Department is getting as well.
Yes.
When we negotiated the contract, they wanted the same amount. Okay. The facilities, well, Phil, you got facilities and you got a second one down the road on CIP, but the first one, a $12,000 cut the fuel tank from the budget. Town can issue fuel cards. So I guess that's just a statement. Can we cut that 12,000 out of the budget, Phil, without any problems?
Well, this particular tank will affect Craig the most. It's in my budget because of where it is and the install of it and that sort of thing. But Craig would have to speak about the use and the need.
Yeah, just, we mentioned it the other night, but, we were able to go this past year without the tank. It is a 500-gallon diesel tank. I think there was some confusion with that. So we do use that to fill a couple of our mowers as well as our big wide area mower. In the meantime, right now, our guys are actually, if I have to fill the big mower, he's got to drive to city yard or to town to the garage to get it filled. So that being the highway garage. So, I think it was asked, well, what's the cost? I mean, the cost of it is the full-time person driving across town in the mower, an $120,000 piece of equipment that goes about 15 or 20 miles an hour. So if he's got to get from the west end of town all the way across to the highway garage, that's kind of what we're talking about. So, it would be valuable for us. It would be, it would be good for us. It's time that we don't have to spend in the morning to send a guy to the garage to fill up. So.
Okay, thank you. Then Phil, the second question relates to the community senior center town hall area with the construction going on. Can costs be reduced associated with overtime and part-time salaries?
Overtime is minimal. In fact, for my facility staff, there's going to be overtime coverage because of the construction. I'm assuming or anticipating, a possible, power outage for the town hall, for them to tie their feeders in for the new community center and the library, because that transformer has to move closer to the building. So, and I'm not sure what their plans are, if it's going to be on, after hours type of thing. But But for custodial staff, minimal. And then the part-time salaries, again, like I explained Tuesday, I'm rolling people into the town hall. A lot of that, because of COVID, we're doing more extensive cleaning. It's going to affect our labor, as far as the amount of time. But I looked at the area today of the existing community center that's going to actually be closed off, because there's portions of the new town hall that was utilized by the senior programs and the parks programs. I know there's going to be, for seniors to come back, we're talking a long-term, phase 4 or 5, whatever that number is on the end of that. But the parks activities, realistically could happen a lot sooner. So a lot of those rooms in the new part of, in the town hall part of the use of the community center can still be used. So that Saturday is typically used for part-timers, because we don't have to pay the overtime. But contractually, we have to give our guys first dibs. But on the average, there might, out of 5, there may be, one person that'll take a Saturday on a rotation basis. So it's mostly part-time. And then that same person or position would also, because of the boat launch opening up, we use those hours for the cleaning of and opening and closing of that facility on weekends. I can, we can go down to just a half a position for that. So that would be a savings of, it'll bring my budget line item 5120 from 60 to 53,000. That's maybe the best. And I wouldn't take any chances, any other chances with that, because I need coverage.
Okay, thank you, Phil. Welcome aboard, Chris. Congratulations. You still awake, or are you dozing off?
No, I'm still here. Yeah, no, ready to go. Sadly, missed the finance meeting.
What was the name? Everett
Alder Duff.
Alder. Oh, there you go. Thank
He
you.
may make an appearance. We're just getting settled in.
Oh. Okay. Moving on. The next one relates to highway. Jim was going to look into the parts and tires to see if they can be purchased this year and inventory as a way to get it into this current year budget. Then we could deduct some amount from the 2021 budget, whatever they purchased in this current year.
You want me to reply to that, John?
Yes, please. I guess it's more, can we buy stuff this year, inventory it,
Well,
and reduce next year's amount?
the short answer is no, because we don't have anywhere to store it. The parts room is very small, and it's the same thing for tires. We have no place to put them. That's the short answer, is we can't do it.
Okay.
But John, let me ask the question there then. If we're not able to do that in the current year and we're under, could we move that money to non-recurring and then reduce the money in the budget for next year?
Assuming that there is a surplus, that nothing comes up, we could do that. Yes.
Okay.
I guess the other question is that, do we have the ability with our vendors to prepay for those parts and delivery down the road?
Generally, I'm sure they would probably take payment, but I think it's more that the town usually likes to pay for something and get something back in return. So if we
Yep.
do pay something out, we're not sure when we're going to be using it, so we're just paying them for storage. So, and we're dealing with, in the overall budget, a small item and so on for us to keep track of. Thank you. Okay, next relates to IT. For John, it looks like the cut that you proposed for the cybersecurity software, if we add that back into the budget, we need to find another 2% within the IT. Prakash recommends reducing some of our copier charges. And I guess if you could provide maybe a listing of some of the items that you were thinking of buying in the information technology service line, to see what we're funding in that account. I guess the key thing is keeping the cybersecurity to protect the network and not make any risky cuts.
Hi, hello everyone. Well, as I stated, on Tuesday, the cybersecurity was a new initiative. That's why it was the initial cut. I understand the need to, to properly protect our network, and what that was going to be used for moving forward was for taking all of our current security, devices and software, and creating log correlation and event correlation with a managed service. That managed service would be able to tell us, hey, these are the trends we're seeing from our other customers. Here's what we're seeing in your box, or boxes, or all our sources, I should say, and give us a kind of focal point on where to focus our remediation if we need to. Additionally, they do offer remediation services as well. That is typically used for forensics during an event, which is very important because if we don't have those forensics done properly, we could miss something and actually try and restore something from a backup or something like that that's still vulnerable. But that's what that service is for. The other items in that account are our internet connection for both our main campus and our remote buildings. So we do have we utilize CEN for our main internet connection, and we also utilize Cox Cable for a couple of the smaller connections that just don't warrant a full-blown fiber connection to those buildings. There's also our cloud backup service. So all our backups come out of that account as well. As I stated, the security operations center was in there, and then there's our web management system. That's our website. It's a content management system. Part of that is ongoing hosting, and a large chunk of that was actually for a website redesign. Our website is now 5 years since our last redesign, and it's starting to show its age. It doesn't play well on mobile devices that we're seeing a lot of right now. So it's really time for that to kind of be updated. But that's everything in that account. Assuming, or going under the impression that we're going to go with the cybersecurity, and if we were to do the website update this year, this upcoming year, that account would actually stabilize probably around 45,000 to 50,000 a year, as opposed to what you see now at 60. And that's simply due to the fact that there's a bit of an unknown in what our hosting costs are going to be moving forward, and a bit of an unknown on how much it's actually going to cost to do the website redesign. Those estimates, those are all taken as estimates based upon what we've seen from other vendors. So with that being said, we did take 2% off of our budget. There were some areas that were easier than others. It was there wasn't really any one major account that I could look at and say, well, we can just chop a large portion of it here. I know that the photocopier line is a concern. In that line right now, that's actually a $4,000 reduction from what we had from this previous year before it's being touched. And that was due to a new leasing agreement that we made with our print provider. The lease agreement runs for another 3 years. In that 34,000 right now, there's just over 18,000 in contractual lease payments that go out annually, which leaves us approximately just a hair under 16,000 as far as print, our printer maintenance program, which they charge on a per image basis. So every time we print a page, we get charged. That charge is for black and white 0.0065 cents per page. For color, it's actually 5 cents a page. So there's a major difference in the color versus non-color. We do, by default, make sure that everybody prints black and white. Unless they absolutely need color, then they have to select a color printer. So that's one of the things we do to try and control those costs there. With that being said, I've been talking to some of the various departments that have higher print utilization. And we've looked at reducing that line by 4,000, which in a sense is a 25% reduction in our non-contractually obligated out of that account. Other areas where I've made cuts, we have in a normal situation without COVID or anything like that, we would have a media room operator up in the room. We have historically carried two operators in that position. One, they would kind of split off. For the last couple of years, we've only had one operator in there, and there's been very little interest in filling that position. So I proposed a cut of $2,000 in that account as well, simply because having that extra person with the proposed changes that we're going to make with the media room, with the grant that we received from the state, we can act as backups to that as well. So a staff member could be able to do it from home if necessary. I've also cut our training budget by $2,600. What that'll essentially do is make it so that instead of having two courses, one per tech, we're going to send one tech to training and kind of alternate in years. We also looked at maintenance contract reduced by $1,500. There was a $1,500 that we carry for maintenance for medium room maintenance. With the new grant coming in, we could probably safely eliminate that this year. I mentioned the 4,000 in the printer, and 3,000 was going to come off the computer line item. That stings a little bit. We're already running very lean. Our 5-year program's essentially turning into a 7-year program for computer replacements. So it's one of those that hurts a little bit. And the rest come out of some of the smaller accounts. 1,200 from technical equipment, 200 from other, 500 technical supplies to round out to the 15,000, which is the 2% cut requested.
Question.
Just go ahead.
Okay. John, I know, the past couple of years we've kind of been digging at IT, and there's no intent there. And it seems like we're always wanting something from IT. We want a better web page. We want these IT services. We want to be able to have meetings through Zoom and all this other stuff. We want employees to have the best computers and software and the ability to manage efficiently and do their work properly. I think some of these are nickel and diming cuts. I don't want to have, I mean, this is just my personal opinion. I don't want you to have your staff on thin ice in terms of operating. That's just my opinion. So I appreciate some of the cuts that you proposed. I would probably revisit some of those. And, that cybersecurity is top notch, in my opinion. And just going back to some of the wants we always ask for, or we always assume we're going to get. Some of the things that we get on the council are colored pieces of paper. We just don't realize the cost behind it. We're seeing more sent through email, which is great, but we demand a lot, and I just don't want to cut from your department more than you need to run efficiently. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, my question was going to be this cybersecurity plan. I don't think we want to be penny wise and pound foolish, but I'm also not a cybersecurity expert. So some of the things that have been making news are like ransomware attacks against big, businesses of all different sizes that can go anywhere from up to $100,000 to millions of dollars to remediate. How is our ransomware profile look like? And does this proposal, if it's in or out, change that risk profile?
So our risk profile in terms of ransomware, it's not just a simple, oh, they installed something on your PC and they encrypted everything. As with most things with cybersecurity, that ransomware attack could come from email. It could come from an infected file that we received some other place. It could come from a vulnerability that was left unpatched or unknown or something along those lines. Our first and best line of defense against ransomware is always our backups. Nothing is foolproof, right? There are times when things are going to get through, no matter how good your security is. You just need to ask the DoD or something like that. Organizations with thousands of times more resources than we have, and they still get hacked. But our first and best line of defense is our backup. So our backup right now actually goes straight out to the cloud. So there's no trace of it on our current network for them to attack. And that is an instance that is actually in the AWS GovCloud. So that kind of it stays within the United States. On top of that, we have endpoint security. We did recently, within the last 2 years, upgrade our security from a traditional, antivirus software, which we were running Symantec, to an advanced threat protection model. We're actually running Carbon Black Defense. That has rules in it that says if it looks like it's starting to perform ransomware-like activity, let's just shut down the process and terminate it. We've had a couple of false positives where there's something within Munis, the way it interacts with some Word and Excel spreadsheets, that it actually says, hey, that looks like ransomware. We stop the process. That's our second line of defense. We have firewalls in place which also look, we try and filter out all the known bad and a few other things around there. We do have capabilities as well as network monitoring. If we see something kind of happening that says, hey, you know what, this endpoint suddenly started talking to this other endpoint, we're going to get notified on that. But the problem is, and the need for Security Operations Center is that a lot of times there's going to be a lot of stuff happening and coming at us that could overwhelm a staff of our size.
So I guess.
John, yeah, go ahead. I didn't know you were asking another question. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I just to follow. So the requested for the increased cybersecurity piece that helps. Is it more of helping to fill in an existing gap, or to help us do better what we currently do well?
A little bit of both, actually. Existing gaps would be what they call a SIM, which is a security event information management. In order to a lot of the automation that comes from that comes from a SIM. In order to program that and utilize the storage on that and everything else, I've looked into it several times, and it's a little cost prohibitive, and it still doesn't address the need for a staff of our size to properly handle that type of a security environment. It is recommended by our we do have a cybersecurity insurance policy, and it is recommended that we have a service that we're comfortable with when it gets point in the if we have an incident that turns into a full-blown breach. We need remediation. We need somebody we're comfortable with, and we need that immediately. Trying to vet out a vendor at that point is really going to be, putting a lot of strain on us.
Thanks.
Yeah, John, so thank you for walking us through those cuts in a very, very methodical way. I appreciate that you didn't go for a hammer, and that was definitely not the intent when we asked for a 15% cut from you. And one of the exhibit A's in that is that we actually went back and asked you to put that 15,000 back in the cybersecurity, because we do feel as a council that it's an important objective to have, right? To have a secure network, right? We do towns business here, so definitely not a hammer approach. We want to take a scalpel approach to this. We don't want to go like indiscriminate cuts. So I do appreciate you walking through this methodically, thoughtfully, and making those cuts. Let me ask you one thing about a very specific categorical question, and if you can answer it categorically, I would really appreciate it. With all the cuts you have made across the board, again, I say like very methodically and thoughtfully, is there any chance you find that there will be an operational security risk to the town with the cuts you're making?
That's an excellent question. As I look through, and I've kind of got my notes up here. Training, part of that is making sure that we're up on the best practices and making sure that we are doing things properly. As we implement, refresh hardware, training does have an effect on that. You can have the best security in the world. If it's misconfigured, you're still in no better position than if you didn't have it.
So let me put it this way, right? Let me put it this way. If there is anything you will like to add back in that budget, which will make you feel better, what will be that percentage? Now, the truth can be anywhere between 0 and 15%, right? So what I'm trying to get at is that idea of which Councilor Emanuel brought up is we ask a lot in this day and age, with all the cybersecurity risk of you. We as councilors, we just want to make sure that there's always be some risk, right? And that risk you can quantify, right? There's a probability with the training budget, from training budget on, right? There's always a probability. What I'm trying to get at is like, are you significantly increasing your probability of an operational security risk by cutting your budget methodically and thoughtfully like you have done?
Not overly.
I think looking at his cuts that he proposed, the copier, the part-time, the maintenance contracts, and the computers seem to be okay. It's always that we always try to have money for training, as John says, so that the people can keep up with it. And those other ones, I wouldn't bother, those nickel and dime ones. So I think Of the 15,000, I think John probably identified about 10,005 to 11,005 if we take out training.
That's,
Could you live with those cuts, John? The 4 for copier, 2 for part-time, 1,500 for maintenance contracts, and reduce the computers by 3.
yeah, that
And
seems,
then add back the security system.
Will that be reasonable in any significant, if it's not increasing your probability of a operational security risk in any significant way? I think that should be acceptable. And that's, again, I say this like, right, the idea is to actually do this with a scalpel, not with a hammer. So thank you for doing that, definitely, going through that process.
Okay. Thank you, John. And then I think there's just one last question for Phil relating to the CIP, the $47,000 cut on, I think that relates to the roof at Fire Station 3, Part 2. I guess spending $12,000 on repairs on a roof. We spend $47,000 to fix and be done with the project. Could you elaborate?
Yep. Just a correction to the fix. It was actually 1,200, not 12,000. And that was recently, that was in March. A little bit of history. It's, again, there's 3 sections: a fire bay section, an ambulance bay section, and a meeting room section, which is on the 2nd floor. The middle section, when we inspected, was the second worst. So the first worst was obviously the one that we just changed out. And the type of leak that we had the other month can potentially keep happening, because what's happening is the roof is leaking as we speak, like I said the other night. And what happens is when water leaks in, the sun bakes the tile, there's vapors underneath, and it causes gas bubbles. And then it basically restricts and constricts. During the day, it balloons up, and at night it comes down a little bit. And that constant motion every day causes the spider web type of effect where water gets in. So the leak that we fixed actually reached the floor, not too much damage to the ceiling. It was kind of over to an edge of a wall, but as we speak, that insulation underneath that is wet, and there's there's a layer of tile, which is the top layer, insulation, and then floor decking. It's our ceiling decking. It's metal corrugated. That is the risk that you take, because when it doesn't dry, moisture doesn't dry on metal, it just rusts. So are we in danger for the rust to go through? No, but can we going forward? We could, but we won't know until we open up that roof and see that corrugated metal. And if that metal is bad enough, though, then now there's an added cost to replace sections that are run. So the roof has met its expectancies, lifespan. It's well over 20 years old. Again, this section of roof was the second worst. I did it in phases to spread my CIP out, so I don't have one huge CIP per year, so I could fit other things in, and keeping it under 100,000 for prevailing wages savings. So if we wait a year, we can have more $1,200 costs. And why so much is when a roof leaks, when you're on top and you try to look for the potential leak, you're guessing. So when the roofer comes, you're guessing an area. They could patch that area. The next rainstorm, it still leaks, because a leak can happen 10, 20 feet, away, follow a beam, and at the lowest point drip. So it's challenging, but that's what we face.
Okay. Thank you, Phil. I believe that wraps up the questions that we received. And I thank those departments that responded to the questions tonight and with a detailed answer. So I guess if there's nothing more on this section, we could move to the resolution.
Before we do, I just like to make an overall comment. First of all, I'd like to thank everybody who joined us on this call. This particular year has been extremely trying, especially in the last 2.5 months with what's happened with the budget. And I'm sure all of us on the council have gotten similar emails, if not the same emails, from some residents, some retired, some not. Basically very concerned that Social Security is not going to have an increase this year. Their investment portfolios, while they were getting 5% and 6%, are negative. Other families have reached out via email. Husband and wife who were gainfully employed 30 or 45 days ago are both unemployed, or one family member is unemployed. Difficulty working from home with kids at home, and all asking us, don't increase the budget. We need a mill rate as low as you can get it. And that's the reason we're going through this exercise. I don't want any of the department heads to feel unappreciated, underappreciated. We're trying to do a balancing act of what we need as a town to function and what residents within Rocky Hill who have had and outside of Rocky Hill, who have had a drastic change in the last 60 days are facing. And unfortunately, that's the kind of the reality of what we have in our budget cycle, at the same time that we've completed a whole bunch of projects and taken on a new debt structure that unfortunately comes due at a time when we could least afford to do so. So I just want to explain the process and why we're going through it. It's not that we're picking on any one department or beating anybody up. It's we appreciate what you do and how you do it, and we're trying to balance the two. Thank you.
And I wholeheartedly second that. I just want to make sure that I do that, because I think all of us agree on that, really. And it's a tough balancing act, and there is no pleasure in going through the exercise, focusing on one department and the other, and we are picking our eye. That's definitely not the intent, and I wholeheartedly support everything Councilor Greenspan said. So.
John, were we supposed to get information about lights? Wait, what did we have questions about the street lights or reimbursement rates or something like that last meeting? Was Mona going to get us some numbers or something?
Yes, I think she looked at some of the electricity charges and try to project how we're going to stand at year end. And I believe the facilities one line, we need to work out some numbers with the Board of Ed, and that was going to be pretty much around on budget. Looking at the street lights in the Highway Department budget, it appears that there could be a savings of $20,000 to $30,000 in this year's budget. Hopefully it's maybe a combination of us budgeting a little too high last year, as well as the street light changes that Eversource put in over the past year or two is taking effect on our budget. But I think our electricity from a town side is going to come in close to budget, but we could see a savings in our street light costs.
I'm just wondering, kind of related to that, when a street light goes out, do we have to report that in order to receive a credit?
Well, when we lose a street light, it's the responsibility of Eversource to replace it. So somehow notification has to get to them. I think the credit that we receive is we're not probably using any electricity because the light bulb's burnt out. But then once they come out and replace it, now I would assume they're not going out that soon. If they did put in LEDs, I believe they have a longer life than the old fashioned Cobra snakes or something like that they called them.
So we don't actually have a plan in place where we would see where the lights are actually out, so we could notify them. It sounds like we're not notifying them. We're not keeping track of that.
Can I answer that one?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
hi, James.
If a light goes out, a resident can notify Eversource. If they call us, we'll do it as well. It's online. You can just give them the location, the number of the pole, and then they would come out and repair or replace the light. But to answer your question, if the light is out, we're still paying for it. We're paying for electricity because none of the lights are metered. So it behooves us to get those replaced ASAP. And John is right. The cost of the electricity for it is less because they are LEDs, but nevertheless, it's a safety hazard, and why pay for something you're not getting?
So do we keep some type of it, like an Excel spreadsheet of that, so we track what's out and what we should be credited?
They usually send us an email that they've gone out and fixed it. They don't send us anything for a credit that I know of at all. So we have to get that notice to them quickly. So
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, you're welcome.
John, I think you said that the electricity for the schools in the town hall would come in close to budget. If the schools had been open, would that have meant that we would be over budget? They've been closed for 2 months.
No, it's more related to the credit that Eversource is posting to the bills associated with this solar farm electricity that the town is purchasing, and we're supposed to be getting a credit back. So this year they're coming in a little bit higher because of the getting better numbers for Mosier School and so on. So I think they would have probably came in over budget, but probably because of the last 3 months, usage is down quite a bit. It's going to be closer to budget for this year, for this current year.
So the budgeted amount for next year would be okay then?
I believe they increased it a bit because of the better historical numbers they have on Mosier School. And assuming a regular school year starting in September.
Okay.
Okay.
Sorry, John, I had a question just in looking over some of the items in CIP. That's why we got you. Some of the items like the higher dollar items like the maintenance of the road repair that's paid through Town Aid Road and the Silas Dean Streetscape, the new phase, that are mostly or all offset by funding from the state or other sources. Does that have an impact on our mill rate, even though it nets out on the revenue side?
No, it's neutral.
Okay.
It's neutral. The problem you run into is if you expend the money, depending on these expenses, revenue neutral items, where you pay the expense and you don't get your reimbursement until another budget year. But in this case, it hopefully shouldn't be a problem, except for Town Road Aid, which is questionable, as this year we didn't know when we were going to get the money. And the theory behind that is the state's giving you this money to do work on town roads in that fiscal year. So we were sort of put at a disadvantage that we really only know that we had this money available for 3 months, but in the long run, it should be mill rate neutral.
Thanks.
Uh, Are we set to move over to the resolution with the cuts?
John, just one quick question before we go there. I mean, on a high level, where do we stand right now with, if we approve the motion, that's 637. So that's 0.3.
Yeah.
If the 800 comes back from the board, can they pre-spend that until the end of the fiscal year and reduce the Board of Ed by 800 for next fiscal year? That's another 0.4. Is that accurate? So now we're down 0.7?
Well, one thing we try not to do is spend in the current year budget for items in the next year's budget. It sort of distorts the budgeting process and so on. Right now, they're estimating that they're going to have 800,000 coming back. And generally with the Board of Ed, the town commits a bottom line dollar amount for them to spend on their budget, however they want to spend it. So it's usually wise financial practice to wait till June to see what the money is that's coming back, and either let the money roll into the fund balance, or we could do a entry to transfer the funds out of the general fund into the non-reoccurring fund for a special project. But it's frowned upon to sort of pre-spend money in the current year for a future year.
I remember somebody else did that in prior years, that it wasn't encouraged. I'm just thinking, if they were able by the end, if their projections are accurate, and he thinks it could be 800 by the end of the year, that they look at reducing their budget 800 for next year, to offset that. Almost like they give the town 800, but we give them 800 in reductions, back and forth. I'm just trying to get down to a lower level. So where do you see anything in addition to this 637? Would you factor in that other 800?
Well, speaking on what the council did earlier this year, month, where we appropriated $800,000 for them to go for the grant on the roof. Currently sitting in their CIP is $1.2 million. And also tonight, reviewed it in finance, where we found the $800,000 in various accounts in the non-reoccurring account. So we established the $800,000 to match that. So the wise thing to do is to cut the Board of Ed's CIP $1.2 million, because they don't need it in the general fund, because we have the money allocated for them to do their roof project in the non-reoccurring account for Stevens roof project. So if you take the $1.2 million from the Board of Ed CIP and add the 600,000, you're reducing the budget by probably over $1.8 million. And I think that brings the mill rate down to around a 0.9 increase.
Could you, I don't want to speak for anyone else. I mean, I'm just thinking if it may be wise. I mean, could you talk to Mark about that and get their buy-in?
I could try to talk to Mark, but I believe the way it was agreed upon is by approving that $800,000 in that resolution that goes to the grant application, the town is committing that 800,000 there. So there isn't really any need for the 1.2 to be used on the Stevens School project, assuming the 800,000 is enough plus the grant to cover the cost of it. So you really have an unallocated capital project number there. And again, to quote the other night, the Board of Ed provides a capital improvement program and the town council decides how to fund it. So the way it looks right now on the paper trail is that the town council is going to fund this Stevens roof project through the non-reoccurring account by reallocating monies to that in the to the Stevens School roof project. And I would recommend that they would cut the $1.2 million out of the CIP because there's really no project assigned to it at the moment.
Okay, so the resolution and those cuts, theoretically, we could vote on it. And we could vote and we could agree to your suggestion. So we don't have to really further do any nickel and diming with these departments and anything like that. We could just do 2 major sweeps and take care of it.
2 major sweeps that would make it a little more than $1.8 million in cuts. And drives the mill rate increase up to 9/10.
Versus 1.7.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Now, John, one of the things tonight we had some discussion, and we obviously the resolution was written before we had the discussions. Obviously, there's some changes to be made on how IT is going to be allocating, so some line item adjustments there.
Yes.
As a council, we need to have the discussion on whether or not we're moving forward with the fuel tank. The part-time position at the fire department was discussed. I'm just looking at my notes as we were going through. So I don't think the resolution's ready to go forward. I think we need an adjusted copy, which could still be approved Monday. Or we could, I think it's the smart way to do it, make those adjustments, have these discussions, and then see what our final number is. We know the ballpark we're in.
Right.
I agree, Alan.
Yes, okay. Well, I'm just saying that how it stands right now is there's a resolution there. If you want to make changes to it, or if you want to accept the changes as is with the adjustments in the IT lines and so on, and then move to another page where going down by more, if you do have some accounts that you want to reduce on similar in past years when we didn't have as many cuts, where you'd say you want to reduce it in the XYZ department and this budget line, you could do it that way as well. As I say, as we stand right now, there is a number of cuts on a resolution that if you want to move forward with it or make adjustments to it, that's your call.
But John, part of the process, we have a resolution, but it doesn't mean we can't discuss other cuts outside of that resolution.
Right. I'm just saying this isn't the only way. If you have additional cuts, you can do that on another resolution,
Okay.
separate resolution.
I just think personally, it's cleaner that if we table this to Monday night, make the adjustments that we heard from John and IT to his line items. And then we have a couple of items I think we as a council need to discuss before we move forward.
Would you do that discussion tonight? So I would just assume that we would change the IT line and take the $15,000, add that back in, and then talking to John, we did the copy and reduction in copier, reduction in part-time.
Right.
Left training alone and took maintenance down at 1,500 and then computers 3,000. And my quick math came up to like, those four accounts come up to 10 million, no, excuse me, 10,500.
10 million would be nice, but
Yeah, that's a lot of photocopies. Instead of trying to do $200 in this line and $300 in that line. And then, or if you want to reduce training, then we could boost that up to get it close to like 13.5, I think.
Right. Well, so I think those are the discussions we as a council need to have before we move a resolution forward.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that we can table till Monday.
But we could,
But I guess for Monday, we do need to somewhat get to a close to a bottom line number. So as part of Alan's discussion for IT services, is it agreed upon that we add back the 15,000 for the security related software and then reduce 4 or 5 accounts to try to make up that 15,000? Are you willing to accept a $4,000 cut in the copier line, which is all of them's going to be under a 01, 500. The copier line would be 5550 minus 4,000. The part-time line would be 51, I think 22, maybe 20 for 2,000. The maintenance contract line, which is 5436 at 1,500, and then computers 5746 minus 300. So
3,000.
So I think that comes up to 10.5. Is there other accounts in that area that you want to cut to get up to that 15,000? Are you okay with the 10.5 cut?
I'm personally okay with the 10.5 cut. And I got some area, I do have an area that we can make up the difference.
Okay.
Yeah, I will be fine with the 10.5 cut as well if we are leaving the training alone, taking into consideration John from IT, his comments and your comments, John.
Yep.
I'm happy we're putting back the cyber 15.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so this resolution will be adjusted based on those, I guess, 5 accounts, adding 1 back and making deductions in 4. Adding 15 back, and looks like we're cutting 10.5.
And John, if I may, I'd like to add to the resolution. There is one line item in the CIP that's the Center Street Cemetery headstone cleaning. And I really have a hard time allocating money to headstone cleaning when I'm talking about cutting a fire department ambulance roof, not replacing windows in a library, cutting overtime to staff in first responder areas. I think that that's something that we have to take out, which will make up the difference of what we're doing in the IT side.
Okay.
So would we fully take that line out or scale it back? 'Cause I do know some of those seem to be at risk of getting further damage, which might increase costs down the lane. So maybe if there's a way just to target some of those at-risk ones with a little bit of money in that line item, rather than eliminating it entirely, we might get a little bit more bang for our buck. I'm not sure what you were proposing, Alan.
Well, I was going to remove it completely based on the way this year's budget's going, Chris. I just, I'd be more apt to put money into a building roof at this point. No disrespect to what the Historical Society's doing or the headstones that are decaying. But when you look at needs versus wants, unfortunately, I got to go with what the needs are.
I think the other thing there is, given that it's not a tremendous amount of money, perhaps we could help publicize a fundraiser or something. You know, maybe there's a way to community raise some of that money to off-place it if we do pull it out.
And I'll be honest, that was discussed when they came last year to finance and asked for $5,000. And the hope was that they would fund some additional money to continue the project. And I don't know if they have.
I think they've done some, they've done that from the standpoint of volunteers and sweat equity, but some of it requires, more skilled folks. But, maybe now that more people are involved, there's a bigger pool of people to draw from.
Sure.
I think, Alan, the bulk of the money this year, I think they replaced 3 or 4 old headstones that had some historical value to it.
And there was a table or a pedestal on a table.
Yeah, there was a table memorial that was pretty much worn out, and they fixed that up. And I think they fixed up another headstone. So that had historical value to it. And then, as Chris said, it's true that I do see in their newsletters that they do seem to have every few months a group that gets together and goes out and does the cleaning of it. So I don't think we've seen any bills associated with that cleaning, but we did pay for the headstone refurbishing.
Possibly the Historical Society can reach out to some of the service organizations. Get some funding.
That would be a perfect project for that Hartford Foundation for Public Giving grant money. We could get somebody to make that request from the community. So unfortunately, I agree with Alan. We probably should cut that this year.
Okay, so noted. Any other adjustments or items, discussion items?
I think a question that might be helpful, and Alan, I don't know if this is or not, about the the fueling that we talked about with Craig. I don't personally have a handle on the opportunity cost, I guess, of not doing it, and I know it certainly is a convenience factor, but how often we're filling up those tanks, if it takes an hour to round trip or a half hour, I don't know how much time we're losing by not having it there. And if we were able to quantify that a little bit, that would be very helpful, because we don't want to try to save $12,000 and find out that it costs us 15 between wear and tear and lost hours or something. I don't know what that number is. I don't know if Craig would be able to quantify that, but that might help make the decision either if that's something that is going to be considered.
Well, the Parks Garage had a tank in there for years that I think between being worn out and probably not keeping up with the codes and so on, was required to be removed. So I guess it was just replacing something that they've had for years. It was a 500-gallon diesel tank for primarily their mowers and so on. Anything unleaded gas, they have to go to the highway garage. So I think it's just replacing something that was there. We could probably look into maybe they could handle a smaller tank if necessary, or they could continue driving to the highway department garage. And I do think Walt has a tank in his pickup truck, so that if someone runs out of gas in a remote location, they could fill it up so we can get back to the station. So it's probably an item that could be put off for a later year. It's probably not important in this year's budget.
John,
Yes?
didn't Phil mention something about being able to cut half a person or somewhere around $9,000 or so?
I think he said in one of his facilities account, we could cut the part-time 7,000.
7,000?
7,000.
That's what I had written down. Which department is that specifically?
Custodial.
Oh, custodial. Custodial part-time.
Correct.
So yeah, it would be out of the custodial account budget 01-500-503, and it would be the part-time line of 5120. He recommends a $7,000 cut to that.
I'd like to propose you make that change to the resolution.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
And where's the fuel tank? What line item is the fuel tank we were just talking about in?
It would be in building maintenance. 01-500.
Be building improvements.
Well, the building maintenance budget, sorry. But the building improvement line, 5720.
Okay.
John?
And they cut that 12,000? Is that the?
Right. In addition to the 5 you had that was already there, right?
Excuse me?
In addition to the 5,000 that was already in the proposal in that line item.
John?
Yes.
So that part-time position at the fire department,
Yes.
sometimes we discuss how maybe we don't, we postpone it so it's in the next year or something. Is this a position that has to be budgeted in this budget? Can we keep that on our radar screen and just move it off of this year?
Perhaps we could just reduce it in half and fund half of it for this year as we develop what the position position involves. So I would say we could probably maybe just cut it in half. Does that sound okay, Mike? I see you popped on.
That, yes.
Thanks, Mike.
So fund half of it.
Maybe we could just have a little bit more discussion with respect to that, because, you know, we've made some very deliberate decisions to not fund positions. And with this one being conceptual, being developmental, being something that we have not had, and some of the things that we anticipate this person doing, you know, I could see, for instance, the grant searching being done by Ray in economic development. I don't know. It's just because it's conceptual. It's just hard to justify funding all or a portion of it when we have cut, you know, police officer and other things like that. So for me, if we could have a bit more discussion, I would appreciate that.
This was a position that was being done by a captain in the volunteer fire department who was also working during the day at the firehouse. So is able to do that for a number of years. That person had since retired from the fire department, and he's just focusing in on his town job right now. So there's sort of a void created because the position is during daytime hours and so on. So it's sort of shifting over from the fortunate of having a person there could do both jobs. Now we're just doing it so that we have somebody there to help oversee the daytime operations. So it is sort of just a switch on just the way we're performing the job and by who.
But
If you add anything more, Mike?
But that position, was that a paid position or a volunteer position? Were these duties done in a voluntary capacity, or were they done as part of the duties of a paid position?
It was done in a volunteer capacity. I think everybody does a little bit of everything to help out whenever possible, however possible. But I think we're also seeing a lot more need for a daytime person to represent the fire department. Again, I went over some of the positions, some of what I feel the key role responsibilities will be. We would most certainly work with HR if this is approved to create the appropriate job description or key role responsibilities in writing for it, for this 19-hour-a-week position. I just see this doing a lot of benefit, a lot of good for the department. The work is becoming longer, a lot more work to running this department, and feel this position would really step up and fill in a void, now and in the future.
Okay, thank you, Chief.
I mean, I think the chief makes a compelling argument. It is a position that somebody was covering, and I think they need the position. And what I'm hearing is that it will make their lives easier and they'll be more efficient if they have a person that does that, because they really don't have anybody that can fill that void on staff.
How many years was this person doing this position as a volunteer?
Quite a few, a number. Over 10, I believe. It also gives us the ability to pick up the void, the somewhat of a void, but also, again, more importantly, to help out with the management and with the future goals of the department, with a lot of the administrative functions. Again, some of the whack-a-mole management we have to deal with, this person could assist with. I really believe it's a necessary position in the department here, just towards the proper management of the department. And then I have the goals right here. But it's, yeah, I believe as, the town continues to grow, our call volume is close to 700 calls a year. I believe this position will allow us to continue in a real safe and effective manner.
Chief, Plunkett, go ahead.
Quick question, Chief. Let's say and this is a hypothetical I'm presenting to you. Let's say we don't fund this position, right? Like, what is the scenario? Can you walk us through the worst case scenario if this position is not fair?
The worst case scenario is we just keep on operating the way we are. Just, well, continue with the our daytime jobs, as well as all the administrative work that we do on nights and weekends, and all the work that goes along with running a department for a town this size.
It's more of like you will have more on your plate and the department and the personnel will have more on their plate. Is that the concern, or is there something else and more to that? I mean, not that that's not a valid concern, just having more hours on your plate, but I'm just trying to get at like a couple of scenarios where, where like this in a very practical sense, like how it plays out, like, and that will help me make that decision, like personally for myself.
Well, let me help you with this. We have 5 chief officers. 1 is currently vacant. We have 19 key responsibilities for those chief officers, aside from managing emergencies and so forth. Everything from budget, policies, procedures, communications, info technology, personnel is a big one, health and safety, we're a safety-based business, training, and it just goes on and on. Apparatus, personal protective equipment, station maintenance, equipment maintenance, as well as 1 person assigned to ISO to ensure that our department is working at a level like this through and is rated through the insurance services office. So there's a lot of stuff that happens. There's a lot of mundane stuff that if we can start, mundane might not be the word, but if we can start with a person helping out with a lot of that stuff, it'll allow the chief officers to further concentrate on what's needed here.
I just have 2 follow-up questions. Are some of those tasks something that you can assign to, when a secretary or administrative assistant? Is my first question. My second question is, you mentioned a chief officer vacancy. Is that something that you're currently looking to fill? And if so, would it make sense to temporarily assign these duties to that person so that we could get through this?
The first question, the first answer is a lot of this stuff, a lot of the work, the proposed work down the road, I would believe is firefighter based. You would have to have a background in that. I'm not sure it would be appropriate for the administrative assistant, who does have quite a plate. And the second part of the question, Madam Mayor, is we already have his tasks lined up, and that's apparatus, personal protective equipment, station management, and equipment maintenance. And some of us are doing double duty with those tasks while the vacancy is being filled.
Right, but the question was, could you assign some of these duties to that person once that person comes on board?
I believe with the task that he's scheduled to take, that would fill his plate.
Okay, fair enough.
A couple of questions for you. This position, is it intended, or that the person who fills this position would be an existing member of the volunteer fire department?
Could be.
Okay.
I mean, the announcement's not out, the role description, albeit I have notes, isn't written. So I don't know if it's premature for me to answer that question or not. I'm trying to give you a good answer, but it could be. It's about the best.
And the reason I'm asking that question, and I know I've had this conversation with Dana in the past, I thought there was some concerns or issues with an existing volunteer member of a fire department also holding a paid position within the same department.
I believe you're referring to the Federal Labor Standards Act that I don't believe this would be affected by, since that regards around pay-per-call and stipends. Whereas if they make, I believe, 25 or 50% of what the job would normally pay by doing a pay-per-call or a stipend, then they're entitled to full-time benefits. But I don't believe this would add up to that. I don't believe it falls into that category.
I mean, that's definitely something we want to look at, assuming that it's a candidate from the fire department that applies. And
you have to have the separate job description, and it all would have to be spelled out through there. And again, most certainly we would work with HR on this to make sure.
The hiring process, you said HR would help you write the description, but would they also be involved in the hiring process, or would that take place within the fire department?
No, they're involved with any type of our paid members. They're involved with, definitely. Yeah, they would do the work on it.
Okay. Like I said, my biggest concern is that I don't want to open up a can of worms that we have a legal issue. And again, the may not be someone who is a volunteer, which would solve the problem.
Right.
Thank you.
And Chief, right now it seems like you're saying these responsibilities are being done kind of all hands on deck, and additional duties that are the existing duties that are on everybody's plate. We have one senior position that's open. If this doesn't get filled and we keep going with the status quo, what are the chances that people might not want to continue to step up to take the additional responsibility that comes along with a volunteer job that already has, a lot going on for it?
That's a great question. And burnout's always a big factor in this job. I think that would be a consideration. What are the chances? I'm not too sure how to answer that, but that would definitely be a consideration.
So just Chris, are you all set? We lose Chris?
No, I'm all
Maybe a
set.
thumbs up.
Okay. Just a couple of observations, and I think the questions are really good and needed. But just from my perspective, I've seen Mike's budgets for a number of years, and he comes in lean. He doesn't ask for luxuries. And if he asks for a new position, I really feel it's warranted. Now, we had the police department withdraw a patrol officer, and there wasn't 2 questions on that. And I think Mike's received about a dozen. I'm in favor of keeping that position. It's part-time. I think they need it. They're growing. They have more calls. There's people coming in, there's people leaving. So I think there needs to be some stability in that administration office, and I fully support it. And I wouldn't, if that's part of the resolution, I wouldn't support the resolution if that's withdrawn. But just to reiterate, Mike is incredibly responsible when he submits his budgets. It's just my 2 cents.
Regarding something that our Commissioner, sorry, let's talk about my job. Counselor Emanuel brought up. I think that the new things that we're discussing today, with the exception of the IT, because I think we're all agreed the 15,000 should go back in and the 10.5 is coming out, that be one resolution. And the things we're discussing today, because we're kind of talking back and forth, and I think we might want to see the numbers, get a sheet with those new numbers or new ideas, and determine, perhaps vote on that piece of it on Monday, so we have a chance to digest it. Because, as we're all talking back and forth, I'd like to see numbers in front of me, and we obviously don't have that. That's just a suggestion.
I agree with you, Mimi. I think it's, we ask these questions, but then you have to process it, and you don't want to have to make a rash decision. You want to make a reasonable decision. And so, that's why we came back with a list of questions today. Potentially we'll have more questions, but at least we have an opportunity to see things in front of us a little clearer. So I agree with you.
I think it would also be helpful to understand. I know we've got a lot of moving parts, and we probably all have a pretty good sense of what we're talking about, but between, big numbers that change, especially with what's going on with Board of Ed and the other things that we're approving, it would be great to know the kind of where we stand with the mill rate and where some of these, important, but maybe not high dollar use cases, how that would impact that. Because if we're sitting, if one of these cuts represents the difference between going up a tenth of a mil or not, then we should know that as part of our decision-making process. Because John Mayer can correct me if I'm wrong, but the mill rate only has so much rounding in it. So something to consider as well, to see how close we are to maybe a tipping point between one number and another would be at least very helpful going into Monday for me.
Well, Chris, actually, that brings me to the point I was about to bring up. We did talk about it in finance briefly, in that I was proposing that we go to another decimal point in our mill rate, because virtually every other town around here does that already. And a tenth of a mil is now a substantial amount of money. And so it kind of puts a finer point on our budget. Hopefully, we're not rounding up to the next tenth. We're trying to save even a little bit to the taxpayer if we don't have to necessarily round up, so that was an idea that I had brought up at finance. I'm not sure if that's something you vote on, or you just do, or I'm not sure what the protocol is.
Is that a charter revision, or can we do that
A
by?
lot of things
Not a
out
charter
there,
revision.
but you do have to come up with some cuts to reduce the mill rate. It's starting at a 1.7 increase. We've been using tenths since I've been here for 20 years, and most councils seem to work well with it. It's easier to work with because it gives you like an idea of, when you're doing this budgeting, how to, if you cut $5,000 out of somebody's budget, it's not going to impact the mill rate. So that's why we're giving something that's saying that for right now, if you want to impact it by a tenth of a mil, you probably have to cut $211,000. If you want to move over to another decimal point, then you'd have to cut it by $106,000 and so on. So the further you get to the right, then you're exposing yourself to errors in calculations. And especially the way this is sounding now is you're going to have 5 hours to adopt a budget on Monday night, or else the red book becomes the town budget. We can't extend the deadline. We checked with the town attorney. The 30-day rule goes into effect that the governor issued in his executive order, ends on May 15th, which is Friday. So the charter requires the budget to be adopted by the third Monday in May, which is the 18th. So that's your drop dead date. So we're saying a lot of things, but no decisions has been made and so on. And I've presented a cut in the Board of Ed that needs to be discussed as well. So if you do my cuts, you reduce the increase from a 1.7 to a 0.9. Now, granted, if you make cuts and so on, we can move it over to another decimal point. But I think for discussion purposes, that if you use the 210 as a tenth of a mil cut, or if you want to go to a second decimal point, then a cut would be like $105,000 per. But again, it would have been nice if we could have extended this out to June 1st, but we can't. And I don't want to fall into what happened before, when the previous finance director was rushed to try to calculate something and made an error that it affected the town by $1 million. So that's my editorial position. But Again, are we finished talking about the fire department's position? What's the council's position on that? Is there any other departments that they want to talk about and so on? Are you going to talk about the Board of Ed tonight, or are you putting that off to Monday as well? I guess just some of the questions that I have putting forth. Thank you.
So I appreciate Chief Gary. Thank you, John. I just wanted to say that I appreciated Chief Gary. He's offering to fund half the position or whatever, that mechanism that we often use in the budget process. I don't think anybody's saying that we don't appreciate the chief's candor and honesty with his budget. I mean, all our department heads do that. So in no way, if we fund that position or we don't, in no way are we impinging on Chief Garahe's integrity in presenting his idea for a new position. But there is an overall general theme of no new hires, no new projects, that we're, everything keeps coming at us, including an exploding debt load, which will only get worse next year, John. So, Councilor Emanuel. So it's just one of those things that I think we want to keep in our sight. We want to acknowledge that it's important for the fire department, but it's a question of whether or not we can afford it in this particular budget and have to look at it for the next one. I don't want to lose sight of it, and I have all the respect in the world for Chief Garahe on this.
So how do we move this forward? Or do we move on to Board of Ed as John, town manager mentioned, or what do we next?
Well, let's give that a minute. Let's move on to Board of Ed. I think running through the numbers as we have consistently for the past several weeks, what makes sense to me on the CIP side for Board of Ed is a $1 million cut. And in addition to that, looking over to the operations side for an additional 200,000. So I'm recommending a $1 million CIP cut and a 200,000 operation cut. Now we know we are anticipating a significant up to 46% reimbursement from the state. We are also anticipating significant organic COVID savings, which essentially reduce the amount of the cost of the roof. And so by going into the CIP, we are really not harming that project. We're allowing them to continue to maintain the buildings in the way that they need to be maintained. And we're not kicking the can down the road. I think next year is going to be a lot harder. And if we can afford to put things into the budget this year that are predictable expenses, I think that's the best way to move forward.
Sounds good to me.
Okay.
Sounds good to me.
So to my total that I editorialized on,
Right.
but I don't have a vote.
But you get an opinion, not a vote.
And John, your editorials,
And understand, you're appropriating a bottom line number to the Board of Ed on their operational side that they can spend whatever way they want to. So you're reducing their allocation from $1.9 million to $1.7 million increase, which would be $46,400,000. The CIP number remains in the town CIP budget under the town control with assistance from the school facilities committee. That
Do we want to have any discussion on that? Or do you want to go back to another item on the resolution?
John, how does that differ from what you were saying?
well, it's more that the CIP number that I was talking about would be reduced to 0 for that school improvement budget line in that CIP. This budget here would leave $200,000 in the school CIP line. And the operational expenses with Lisa's proposal is reducing their operations by 200,000. So the town is only allocating to them 46,460,000. So the other way, the allocation would be higher by $200,000, but their CIP would be less. So
So your suggestion is more.
the bottom line's the same, but the strings attached to it are a little different.
Correct. The net is the same, but your proposal was more allocation towards their operating budget.
No, mine was more towards reducing their CIP number that they requested because the money is in a different fund to cover that cost. This is just splitting the pie up so that their operating budget gets a $200,000 reduction, but their CIP only gets $1 million reduction. Their CIP that's in the town general fund.
Okay, thanks.
I mean, for what it's worth, that combination is fine by me. So I don't know about others think.
John, just a question on that for you. Right now that they're anticipating a cost savings to date, I think it was $811,000. And we now know that school is not going to be going back this year. So that number can potentially go up. If that number goes up, let's just say $100,000, is there a mechanism that we can split whatever the additional savings is and put it back to their operations and take a portion back to the town side?
I think it's easier to appropriate the savings to a CIP project than playing around with increasing their allocation, because a lot of this is driven by, I think, state statute, and they're monitored closely by a large department in Hartford and so on. So if you make any adjustments to their allocation, I don't know whether that sets off some bells and whistles that causes a mountain of paperwork that needs to be done. But I think if we follow our past practice, where generally any savings, we usually apply it to a CIP project that's funded through the non-reoccurring account through that year-end journal entry, how we're going to use their savings as of June 30th.
I'd accept that instead of operating, going to a
They
future.
would just avoid operating because
Yeah, that would be fine with me. It kind of incentivizes them to continue to reduce costs, but at the same token, they get a portion of it back without, hurting operations. We just don't know what that number is.
yes.
Are we adding that to the list, the resolution?
Well, I like Mimi's suggestion to leave the list alone and make these other items separate, because otherwise we're never going to get this completed.
Oh.
And hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Mimi.
What I can do is when we conclude tonight, I can update the resolution with the increases and changes in the IT, the Board of Ed 2 adjustments, the cemetery adjustment, the building improvement removal, as well as the custodial 7,000. If there's any others, I'll do that, and then send an email out first thing in the morning for people to review to everybody, and then comments can be made. Probably reply all, and refine it to get to a final resolution that can be discussed and approved on Monday night.
I kind of thought we were talking about two resolutions voting on what you presented initially and then these other things separately. Because I think we're pretty much agreed on most of what's already on here, what's on here with the change in the IT. So I think we can get that out of the way. Then we just have that smaller list to work on Monday. With
Okay.
the new items.
That's even better.
That's my thought.
So then on Monday, we would just approve a final resolution that amends the red book rather than going through page by page and line by line. That's correct?
Right. If you took this resolution in front of you tonight, that, let's just go with the bottom line number, be 636, all the red book accounts would be adjusted accordingly.
Mhm.
And then on Monday night, I guess we'd add whatever was discussed tonight, which just looks like it's all the IT ones sort of throw things off, but it looks like it's 2 Board of Ed adjustments and the Center Cemetery, building improvements, and the custodial. And that would be another resolution. But if you approve this one tonight, then you cut the budget by, let's say, $600,000+.
John, a quick question. What's up in the 2 items you described? Does that include the position, the fire physician we've been talking about? Where is that right now?
It's still in there unless, did you make a recommendation, reduce it in half? Did I miss?
Well,
No, I haven't, but
did.
I'm sure.
I did recommend the partial funding technique, and Chief Gary, he seconded that. I believe that he was okay with that, and we were kind of at that point when we were discussing the position in general, right? And I think we all agree that it's a good resource for the fire department. That's not in question here.
Okay, so that would be a reduction of, I think, about 14.5.
14,850.
850. Thank you.
Is the only other, unless there are other items, the only other outstanding item, the CIP for the roof, for the ambulance bay? Outstanding items?
That's still in there as a cut.
Right.
What were you suggesting, Jeff?
I just suggest, I just didn't know if there are other outstanding items to discuss besides the roof on the ambulance bay, or because
Okay,
it sounds like we're maybe getting to a point where we've hashed out most of the questions. So I didn't know.
it sounded to me like John made a compromise that we were going to operate in tents, but leaving the option open to go another place, just if that comes to be tomorrow.
Well, what we're doing is, however you come up to the cuts,
Yep,
we'll take it out to, a second decimal point. I think for the point of discussion here, just to give an idea of where we're getting to, but when you come up with your final cuts and we figure out what the mill rate needs to be, we'll try to get it to 2 decimal points.
Right. Understood.
So if that fire department ambulance fire roof is within the rounding adjustment, we may be able to incorporate that back within our budget number. If we're looking at a 0.9 and we're at, I don't know, 0.88, the difference would be the 2/100ths of a mil.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I think, based on my math, I think that's kind of where we are. I think we're like 0.86, 0.87. So you'd be like 0.88, 0.89 if you threw that back in. But that needs to be verified.
Yep. But as right now, we're taking it out, and if the numbers work accordingly, then we'll add it back in, but we'll treat it as a cut.
Does anybody have any comments one way or the other about the roof?
I personally feel like, adding that back in may be the better choice this year for us if it's not going to drastically impact where we want to come out at the end of the day, particularly if we're putting $1,200 per leak into repairs. We don't know what's going to happen this winter. So, potentially that's an improvement that needs to be done.
It sounds in pretty bad shape right now, so
Yeah,
seems like we may have many $1,200 charges.
sounds like it.
And the $47,000 price tag will probably be 50 or more next year if we wait, just with inflation.
I don't know, the way the consumer price index is going down, it could be less.
Yeah, but construction stuff, those guys are busy, I guess. So.
They are busy, yeah.
Okay.
So are we leaning toward putting that back in? Is that everyone's feeling, or?
Yeah, I think that's more reasonable. I mean, we want to look at where we are at the numbers, but roofs don't fix themselves naturally. And I think we've also repaired other parts of that roof. So it would seem to make sense to do it if we can.
So moving forward, do you want to address this resolution by just reducing it by the 15,000? And that's the only adjustment to that page. And then leaving everything else discussed tonight would be on a smaller resolution for discussion on Monday? Or do you want to leave both of these resolutions for Monday, or?
I mean, would it be better if everybody got to see both resolutions in kind of what I guess we would call their final state to read, and then we approve Monday? I don't know what everybody's just.
We have to approve Monday.
No, I know, but as opposed to approving one of them tonight, I'm saying.
Well, the point would have to be, we could prepare the 2 resolutions. If there's adjustments to be made, they can be made and then presented at the council meeting on Monday night to be voted upon, but basically the resolution Monday night would probably be finalized at that point in time. And then that would give finance time to calculate the mill rate and so on.
And John, in the current resolution where you said the only change would be to take out the 15,000 for IT services, the amounts we talked about cutting elsewhere in IT would be on the second resolution?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm fine with voting Monday as long as it's two separate resolutions.
Yeah,
So if my math was correct, the IT service line on the resolution would go to 0 instead of 15. And then the bottom line total would be 621.
Yep, 621,946.
And then everything else that we talked about tonight, I would include the 4 IT cuts and the other ones that we discussed from the fire custodians, building improvements, and my favorite one, the Board of Eds.
Yeah, and I think we're pretty much in agreement on this portion of the resolution tonight. I'd like to see it for Monday, but I don't want to say consent agenda item, but I think we're gonna move very quickly through it.
No, it's going to be on new business.
Oh, no, I didn't need it would be on, it would move
no.
as a consent item.
John, do you have an idea, the totality of the two resolutions, the total cuts versus what the red book said? Or is that not something you got?
Yeah, I think it's going to be between 8, well, the cuts would probably bring it down between 8 and 9/10. So it's pretty much putting the increase probably in half. So it could be in the mill rate increase could be around 8 point something mill rate increase.
Right. You know, I was talking about like the dollar amount of the cuts. Like the first resolution is now 621,946. Are you at a point to ballpark what the second resolution would be dollar wise? If not, that's something you could.
It's like 1,200,000 and maybe 45,000. I forgot.
I had about around 1.2, give or take, yeah.
1.25.
Mm.
Because I got 19. Yeah, so it's close to just maybe under 1,250,000 plus the 621.
Right. Okay. Okay.
And that does leave the roof as a cut in those calculations.
Oh, it does. Okay.
If you want to take the roof out, then we got to reduce it another 47. So then it's closer to a.
Yeah, I didn't like what I mean. I didn't. Everyone seemed sort of on the side of putting it back in. Is that a fair assessment, or I don't want to speak for people, but.
Well, can we just put it back in? I'm just curious now that we're talking about it. I mean, can we just see what that number is? I'm just curious.
Let's see who's quicker, Jeff or John.
Well, I already have the number, so.
All right, what's the number with
so for the second resolution, I get 1,199,350. But I got to make sure I have everything John has. I could have things slightly off of what John has too. So that's why I wanted to.
So what it would be if we took the roof out as a cut, then our resolution total would be reduced by like 57,500. So it.
No, isn't that 47,000 the roof?
Well, plus the, oh, I'm sorry, plus the 15,000 for the IT.
Oh, yeah.
Looked at a different number, so that's higher than that. It's like 62,000. So you're reducing the 632 by 62,000. So what's that about?
Oh, that's in the original. Okay. I see.
5,600, 560,000 perhaps.
574, 946 I got.
Okay.
Let me just check it out to see. 636, 946 minus 62,000. Yeah, 574, 946 would be the first resolution. So I get it, yeah. So it's around, I think I hit the number you were saying. About 1.25 million, right around there for the second resolution. Just a hair under it.
Yep.
We round it up, Jeff?
Well, I give you the exact number, but I'm just, for our purposes tonight, that's,
So you'd have approximately 1.824 in cuts between the two resolutions, if Jeff's math's correct. Passing you the buck to you, Jeff.
I'm writing that.
It's your number. Okay. So I can work on that, and as I said, I get the two resolutions to the council. I'll probably just do an attachment as well as on the email to get a look at it, so that get a quick look at it and for the weekend, and any questions I can address them tomorrow, and then we'll make it official on Monday night.
Excellent.
That sounds like a great plan.
I think we're in a good spot.
Good.
Okay, so we're going to move off then of item A and move on to item B. Is there any other discussion this evening? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Get some sleep, Chris.
Working on it.
Hey, congrats, Chris.
Got a few kids to put to bed first.
The baby.
How many do you want to have? 5?
No. Yeah, there'll be no rounding out to additional decimals.
Yeah, Chris, is he gonna be following the Bucks now?
Yeah,